year, but really look at where are we from a portfolio standpoint and an optimization standpoint. Are we utilizing the space? Are we utilizing even 50% of the space? And not only are we utilizing it, but is there a way that we can combine it? Is there a way that we can leverage it? Is there a way that we can combine, God forbid, two different divisions, imagine, in one building, right? Two divisions that don't talk because they're different silos. And think about the holistic approach of our business across our portfolio and how to make most use out of that, and then roadmap that, right? So instead of thinking about it as, oh, I have a new BU coming in, I've got an executive that says I've got this much headcount and I have this much growth, find me space. Let's think about a 3-year, 5-year plan. Where are we going with our portfolio? If we assume for a second that the premise has been, let's not think about real estate because that's not our mainstay business. And just to be clear, our mainstay business is taking care of our patients at Fresenius. Patients first is really what we're all about. So real estate tends to be this other thing that becomes, of course, as we all know, number 2 on the balance sheet, right? And so my view was working with Scott, who runs facilities, is to make sure we think about how can we optimize our portfolio and how can we roadmap some planning so we can have discussions with executives on really changing the business in a way that helps the business. It has to be impactful to the business. And that's not necessarily impactful from a financial standpoint. That certainly is one element, but it needs to be from an employee standpoint also. It needs to be an experiential impact that is going to help the business evolve going forward. So these are fairly unheard of concepts in a large company that doesn't think about that in the front of their head, right? So we started to take this on as something that we knew we needed to do. And in order to do that, what we really needed was technology. We needed technology and we needed skills in the industry, like the members on our team that are on this call, like yourselves. There are a lot of pockets of expertise. And a lot of times what companies run into is they get very insular. They have internal groups, which can be very skilled and very deep. But I like to always leverage the external partners as well. And so we knew we were going to need to get some industry skills in, and we were going to need to get some technology in. And then we started to develop what we called a hybrid core team. A corporate core team, this is a new concept for Fresenius. Frankly, it was a new concept for me to think about it this way, and the way that I'll call it, marketed it, is that this corporate core team was a hybrid approach between our internal FTEs and our external partners across various fronts. What do we mean? We mean people that understand space. We need people that understand utilization. We need people that understand design. We need people that understand real estate out in the industry, not just inside the Fresenius walls. And so we started to talk to a number of companies, and we had large roundtable discussions to make sure that we understood, based on some of my prior experience working with some companies and others, bringing in who we thought were candidates that could be part of this corporate team. And what Mark, I think, was alluding to in his kind words earlier about working with professionals, or I guess he said adults, so I'm not so sure about that part of it. But we actually have had a very good, very solid approach about having each partner as we bring them on is part of weighing in and voting in a new partner. And now we have this core team that is very strong and interdependent. So I'll pass off to Scott, who is my partner in this, how we actually developed these partners and where we went through with that.
Thanks, Rich. So we believe really to achieve true optimization and efficiency and utilization, we need to push for change and change in how we manage real estate and break down the misconceptions of how we office effectively. So we put together a core team to assist with the process with experts in technology, design, brokerage, engineering, and implementation, as Rich mentioned. The key factor in creating the change comes from the technology side, as we needed data to paint an accurate picture of utilization. So in order to do that, we needed to incorporate new technologies, one being an IWMS tool and the other sensors, to support our proposed future of work program. and arm us with clear, factual data to drive the change. The systems we chose were provided by iOffice and BirdSense, respectively. And we also partnered with 4-Point Project Management and Margulies for implementation, design, execution on all of our visions for the future of work. The iOffice system was the first piece of the puzzle we needed to catalog and understand what the portfolio actually looks like and establish our baseline, or ISMAP, if you will, of our real estate portfolio. The iOffice system and sensors combined gives us the ability to track factual and real-time reservation utilization data in a variety of ways via the dashboards, which nicely natively integrate into one another. They speak the same language, so it makes it very simple to kind of have a one-stop shop for an information pull. Where in the past, we really relied on observations, card access reports, network hits, and the least valuable of all, input from our business leaders, which all proved to be less accurate in representing the true usage data we were after. And this was made evident after our initial piloting of the sensor technology in one of our corporate locations. The sensors actually yielded a 40% discrepancy from the original assessment process, which was pretty effective in making change with some of those business unit leaders. But I'm really not trying to be disrespectful to the business unit leaders, but they were misinformed. They have operated, in such a way for so long that they were blind to the underutilization right in front of them. Work from home was a taboo concept as well. They shied away from the thought of it, and they were sure that their employees would be far less productive if they were to participate in that, even though they actually were, and it wasn't even being recognized by the leadership. So also their perception of space capacity needs was skewed in respect to growth. Every leader I spoke with in the past anticipated doubling their team within 6 months. So we would build to that spec. And now we'd be left with inflated capacities that sit vacant due to growth never coming to fruition, or sometimes operational changes. And the mention of a flexible work environment typically got me thrown out of rooms as their nameplates on the walls meant everything to them for whatever reason. But now with our utilization tools, we're changing these legacy perceptions and moving in the right direction. Go to the next slide.
Yeah, a couple of things I would add to that, Scott, is it was important for us to make sure that when we had discussions with the business unit leaders, that this was not a prescriptive process. This was not real estate driving. Frankly, it wasn't finance driving. We were fully endorsed from the top down, fortunately, with regard to the studies, but it was important for them to understand that we're partnering with them. But the other part of it was they need to be intellectually honest and knowledgeable about what true utilization means, right? And so most business units think about utilization or capacity as, assigned space and nameplates, and therefore, okay, maybe Joe doesn't come in every day, but most people do. And they really didn't have the fact-based discussion or the data until Scott was able to work with these partners of ours and actually show them the real utilization that's going on and have the intellectual, honest discussions with them about what their true needs are. And that was kind of an aha for a lot of business owners. I think first they welcomed the fact that we weren't pushing. And second, they welcomed the fact that it was fact-based. As much as they couldn't believe what they saw, we actually had data. Thanks, Scott. And this next one, what ended up happening was, of course, then, COVID hits, right? And I remember, and I'm sure all of you do remember, as we evolved through that, I remember leaving my office and telling the people out in front of, in the workstations that were around me, well, the governor just decided that we're in a state of emergency. And everyone thought I was joking. And I couldn't believe it myself, actually, because I just heard it over a news feed. But back then, no one knew what was going to be happening. But it turns out that we had work streams in place similar to ours, driven by HR and IT, that were really kind of a work from home work stream. just because of pre-pandemic business as usual, but we want some people to be able to work from home. Well, this pandemic actually accelerated that, right? If you noticed what Scott said in the last slide, working from home, working remote's impossible. We can't do that. We have to have people in, we have to collaborate, we have to blah, 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 right? And now by de facto, we have everyone remote, 100% remote suddenly, right? But it had caused the HR policies and the IT policies to accelerate. And it caused us to make sure that we were keeping in stride, not only with people being effective in the remote locations in their homes, whether it be their kitchen tables or they had their own offices or what have you, but remote, having that be effective. But we wanted to make sure that with this team, we were making steady strides going forward to position ourselves. And we find ourselves now to be very well positioned, because even during this, what I'll call downtime, meaning utilization downtime in offices when everyone is at their remote locations, this team was continually working on how do we think about this from a design standpoint? How do we think about this when we return to work? What can we be doing? So we actually were able to couple the crisis situation that we're all living through, and hopefully it'll be by us someday soon, but couple that with what our business challenges were to actually leverage it and take advantage of that. So the team will tell you that oftentimes in our discussions, we were always concerned about anything going idle. Just because the executives weren't deciding what to do yet, because no one really knew what to do, we wanted to make sure that we took advantage of that whole cycle there while people were out of the office to be doing everything from new corporate designs to pilot studies to new utilization strategies to portfolio strategies and optimizing it. So it actually put us in a very good position for when the executives do decide, okay, it's time for us to move. We're able to talk about how we can optimize the portfolio. We're able to talk about how we can implement these technology systems that have been piloted, tested, loaded. And as many of you people know, if you worked with these technology partners, it requires a pretty heavy lift working with the HR departments, the IT departments, and loading the data so that the different modules that you're using actually tick and tie with what your employees' needs are. So through Scott's great work and this team's great work, we've actually been very well positioned to now put a suite of options in front of executives that are currently being discussed on how to go forward with that. So it has well positioned us, this pause, if you will, throughout the pandemic, for us to continue to develop. And one other thought I just want to make sure that I put out there, because I think it's critical to our team and our success. Many companies, when they try to do something that's I talked about it before, if it's cost transformation or some kind of an initiative, they tend to be event driven. Let's save money, let's reduce space, and then they go, thanks, that's over, right? So it was a heavy lift and then it's over with. This is different. And we have been continually feeding this into the executive team that this is a continuum of work. This doesn't stop. This is not, okay, everybody's back in, here's the setup. This is, we continue, and the technology will allow us to continue to monitor, to continue to resize, to throttle up or throttle down space as the business needs go up or down, so that it's a constantly evolving environment for us to make sure that we're getting the best company economics, but also the best employee experience. And then we had some actions with our partners, Scott, that you want to talk to.
Yeah, we created a workflow, and again, Rich's point, COVID had one positive, and it was really the effect that it had in showing us that we could work from home, we could be effective in doing so. Unfortunately, the downside is we couldn't really use our technology to track utilization because nobody's in our buildings, they're all closed. So in order to pull together our real estate strategy, we created more of a workflow focused on capacity demand needs. So we shifted gears and partnered with our HR team after months of working from home to create an employee survey that initiated our new workflow. And what we did is we asked thousands of employees pointed simple questions across North America. Can you work from home? Do you want to work from home? And how many days would you anticipate coming into the office, post-pandemic? There were additional questions, but these really gave us the data points that we were looking for. The employees had spoken.
Let's talk about the messiness of that for a little bit,
Mhm.
so that people understand what this is really like, because in the back of their heads, if they've ever tried this before, they can all imagine it, right? So at the executive level, we'll tell you guys what we need, just survey us, right? And then we worked with HR, and HR said, okay, I'll tell you what, we have HR business partners that'll work with teams, and they'll get this tops down kind of view of what the demand really is. And then we'll kind of tailor it depending on what that executive thinks they need. Well, then we had our own bottoms up survey. I'll call it, Scott. It was a kind of a survey monkey kind of thing, right? That we piloted, that was actually getting to the FTEs, right? So now you have, imagine this, right? You have a spectrum of the executive saying, well, we need, I'm just gonna throw numbers out. We need 100 seats and 3 conference rooms with a workstation, coffee station, whatever, right? And we have employees in the bottoms up survey, FTE by FTE, saying, I'm good, thank you. Thanks for, if I need an office, I can come in, that's great, but I'm good at home. And what were those results, Scott, when we did FTEs? What do those stats look like?
Oh, it was dramatically different. I think about 45% of people wanted to work from home 5 days a week. And then and it trickled down, 20% 1 day in office, so on 2 days, and it just trailed off. Nobody wanted to be in 5 days, that's for sure.
Yeah, and so the only reason I mention this is it's always important to cross-check, right? We're cross-checking, we have the tops down in the HR-led initiatives from surveys, but we also have our own surveys kind of bottoms up, so that, again, we have data. It's the same way we have partners cross-checking each other, just making sure that we're thinking about this the right way. And then that was an eye-opener, and we've been able to use that actually very effectively. Thanks,
the data has been crucial. We have site data for each location across North America, and we're talking about hundreds of facilities. So it's very important to understand that if the goal is to optimize this portfolio. Working with Margulies and Fort Point, we were able to create some calculators to drop this data into and help us assess true square footage need for these locations across the board. It's been really eye-popping as to the different opportunities for dispositionings or consolidations and just right-sizing our space across the portfolio. And imagine all of these different scenarios that we put together have really spawned another round of conversations with our business unit owners, and the results have been dramatically different so far since the pre-COVID meetings. So the leaders really see it now. They understand we can be productive working remote. The partnerships are growing with these different business units, and the idea of a flexible office environment is now well received. They're understanding that the office is now simply another option that supports how we work or how we have been working for the past year remotely. It's more of a collaboration tool where heads down work can continue to go on virtually or at home. And there's really been a cognitive shift in their feedback as well. No longer are they guarded or emotional. They're open to new ideas. Many were ahead of the curve before we even got to the table and had made the decision for their teams to be remote 100% of the time. And they're looking to vacate space and coming to us with those types of requests because they understand their actual true need for space now and how they can still be effective in a more flexible environment. So as we progress through the optimization initiative and execute on our future of work strategy, we'll reintroduce the technology, as Rich mentioned before. We don't want this to be an event. We're not doing this once. We're going to continuously watch space usage. We're going to use the technologies that we have to understand the reservations and the actual real utilization via the sensors, time and space, how we're effectively using space, and adjust as the business changes over time, as headcount changes and fluctuates. Pass back to you, Rich, for any comments.
No, the only thing I would add is that there were some parallel processes that we started to fold into this. You see in the diagram down to the right there with regard to strategy and site-by-site analysis, there's a 360 process. And 360 is essentially taking any location and looking at what's within driving distance, time-wise, right, as opposed to miles, time-wise within you know, a 360 circumference of that location. And what we were finding is that we actually had divisions, and sometimes in buildings, and, you know, within 10 minutes away, as maybe some of your companies have, or if there aren't other locations that we could consolidate, there might be just better opportunities with regard to market price and all kinds of those kinds of things that we do on the real estate side. And we launched that in parallel with this. So that too has really helped us, again, be very positioned to not only go forward with the technology, but now as business units say, hey, I think I want to do this, or I think I want to do that, we have a team, a cross-functional team that's able to put that through a process that looks at everything from market availability, market costs, FTE count, shifts in demand for space, and give them alternatives that have the different financials associated with it. So there's a lot of this that has, fortunately for us, really tied together again to position us quite well for the next phase in our company.
Great, thank you, Rich and Scott. Let's take a moment to, as we go into these break rooms, to learn from each other. And Rich and Scott talked about some of the metrics that they were gathering, and I think the thing I've learned most vividly through this process is that if you want to convince people into a particular belief in one way or the other, the best way to do it is to have good data. And to have good data, you have to measure things so that you know that it's accurate. And so Rich and Scott have talked about some of what they were measuring. When you go into these breaks, talk about what some of the things that can be measured in addition to what they've talked about. And then when you come to a couple of conclusions, chat them to me, and I will share them with everybody else as we move from the break room into talking about the actual implementation of the strategy that Rich and Scott talked about.
All right. I popped the question in the chat too, just so everyone can reference it, but there will be moderators in each room. It might take me a minute to get a moderator to your room or rearrange moderators, but after a minute or two, there'll be a moderator to help with intros and get the conversation going. And I'm going to pause the recording.
That really provided the whole picture. So they had chosen, before we came into the picture, they had gone through a selection process and had chosen iOffice. And we implement iOffice systems, and we were fortunate enough to implement this from beginning to end across a series of modules. And so what you find with these new IWMS systems is they really are intended to run your entire workspace, and you can choose modules depending on what your needs are. So what you see here is the series of modules that we implemented for Fresenius. Everything is really based or foundationally based on the space module. That's sort of your classic set of CAD plans, polylined, cleaned up, and attributes referring back to specific polylined areas. That's the source of a lot of the reporting from a space perspective. And then what you find is there's additional modules that become more externally facing, such as the visitor module that you can roll out to really facilitate your visitor process, the service request module, the reservation module, as you all might imagine, is incredibly popular right now for a host of reasons. And they also implemented the move module. What's really cool about all of this is no matter what Fresenius chooses to do in the future with their real estate, this system will support the mobility of their employees. And I think that's really important. And what you see here is an image of a phone, right? The Hummingbird app that's part of the iOffice platform provides that mobility. And then you see a branded QR code. That's all with a mobile device and really supports work orders, reservations, wayfinding. So there's a lot of touch points with the employees that I think is really important in this next generation of real estate tools to support your new workspace. Fresenius, again, in the theme of FMForward, they were forward thinking and had really decided on a number of these tools and strategies pre-COVID. What's proving out is the return on investment here, because what you're going to see on the next slide, Mark, is how we have developed a scalable implementation plan for any scenario, for any site. And we're not going to go through all of these, as Janet calls it, the measles chart, but what it shows you is that iOffice actually is involved in a number of these steps, and we need to make sure all of the employees get onboarded appropriately and trained appropriately for this product, because I will tell you, people will blame the product, but a lot of times it's they haven't been trained, they don't understand the shortcuts, they don't understand the value to them. This is a great user interface, so it's a pretty brief training that will be mandatory for their folks as they come back to work, but this is going to really streamline the return to work process and then the future of work, ultimately, that Margulies Peruzzi will be designing into the spaces that are retained. This will become part of their everyday toolkit when they're working on site. The internally focused piece of this, as we talked about with metrics, it is providing between iOffice integrated with the VergeSense sensors, a very robust reporting package that can be customized. And that's called the Insights module that comes with the platform. Those tools really provide an internal and external way for Fresenius to continually improve this process. Again, the 360, right? That sort of falls into the continuous process improvement that they are invested in going forward. What's really cool about all this is they started this process pre-COVID. It's really showing the return on investment as we get back to work. And I think that's really the theme with this IWMS tool.
Great. Thank you, Christine. We're going to jump right over the second question because we don't actually have time for it unless we do at the end. And Janet, why don't you talk about the actual implementation of the strategy that Rich and Scott talked about and based on the data that Christine explained.
Thank you, Mark. I would say if there's one question I've been asked every day for the past year, it's been, we're going to go back hybrid. How many desks do we need? I mean, I probably heard that question before the pandemic, but it's really become a constant thing. And so the questions become, is your company going to use some kind of hybrid work model? And is the phrase Mark has used often is the toothpaste is out of the tube. And I think that very graphic image, but you know, the idea that people have realized that you really can do some of your work remotely has really stuck. And so even when it's safe to go back to the office 5 days a week, it seems like that's not really going to be a common model. And so obviously there's some impact to the space. One of the really critical questions is, if people are going to work in a hybrid model, are they still going to have a one-to-one assigned desk, or is there going to be some kind of desk sharing? Obviously, if you have one-to-one assigned desks and people only come in 1 day a week, there's going to be a lot of empty space. You know, it's not really an efficient use of real estate. And frankly, it's a very low energy way to work in an office where there's just lots of empty space. So we've been looking with a lot of our clients, including Fresenius, on the, you know, the what if scenario. What if we decide to share desks, go somewhat unassigned, partially unassigned? And the key to really doing that is to do the kind of survey that Scott and Rich are talking about, where you ask leadership what their opinion is, and then you also do bottom up and ask all the employees what they are intending to do. Somehow you have to reach a consensus. And if you look at this chart, it shows this is not particularly Fresenius, this is another company. But if you look at what percent people identified they would need to be working, 1 day remote was 25%, 2 days remote was 50%. So it's kind of interesting to see. And this really varies by company greatly. But, you know, if you kind of put this through a calculator where you'd say if someone's going to be in the office 5 days a week, they get a desk. If someone's going to be in the office 1 day a week, you know, they should just get a fraction of a desk, which they would share with 4 other people. So there's kind of a mathematical process. We don't have to go through it, but if we go to the next slide, pictures always help to explain something. So this is actually Fresenius location that we used as kind of a test case. So this is the existing space. You can see it's kind of a typical arrangement of workstations and offices. And the critical thing to look at is that the square foot per seat is equal to the square foot per person. Obviously, it's 1-to-1. So there's 285 square feet per seat and per person. And so after going through the whole exercise of surveying people and also optimizing the workstation size, in the previous plan, we had some very large workstations, which really are not necessary anymore. And we went to look at a 6x6 workstation. We also applied some design tools where we were sort of looking at optimizing a 4-pack of workstations, thinking that if you can do an arrangement where you don't have people face to face, that will help in the kind of transition post-pandemic where people feel uncomfortable kind of breathing down each other's necks. So we actually increased the number of seats, shockingly, to 303 seats, even though there's much more kind of open white space that you see in the plan and way more collaborative space. So we not only increased the number of seats, but now based on the metrics from the surveys that Fresenius did, we can actually house 594 people in the same space. Not all at the same time, obviously, but over the course of a week. And so that brings the metrics from 238 square feet per seat, which equals 121 square feet per person. So this kind of shows a really different way to look at metrics in space that started a little bit before the pandemic with companies that were looking at unassigned seating, but now it's really much more critical to look at it that way.
So let me share another screen here, which will show you really what the result is of this. There we go.
It was on a second ago.
Mark,
Yeah.
as you're doing that, I'm just letting folks
There we
know
go.
for time, it is almost 1. We're staying here as we finish out and we'll go to the FMForward overtime right after we're done here. We just want folks to be aware.
Great. So this is the, shows the results.
So the point of doing this video was really to show what it feels like to be in the space that we're suggesting is the future of work for Fresenius. So as you can see, the use of iOffice is very critical. So we're showing the experience of an employee who would go on the phone and reserve a desk, reserve a conference room, reserve food, potentially if they need it for a meeting, so that their day is kind of set up before they even step foot in the space. There are a whole lot of features that are identified. A lot of them have to do with post-pandemic things such as using touchless controls, make people feel more comfortable in the space and to make space more hygienic. The use of lockers, which you're seeing right now, is also really important if you are going to go to unassigned seating. Obviously, there are things that people are going to need to keep in the space and need a place where that can be secure. Again, this is all kind of touchless technology that is part of iOffice. Another thing that's really interesting, I don't know if Christine mentioned it, but this can be also used to trigger cleaning in the environment where people are very concerned about shared spaces and who sat in the desk before I did, and is the space clean. That actually understanding when spaces are being used and vacated can trigger a notify to clean a workstation, so that the next morning when somebody comes in and uses a desk that was used by somebody else, you have a kind of comfort in knowing that it's been cleaned and sanitized.
Yeah, those are all automated reports that can
Yeah.
go to a variety of audiences at the end of each day.
So this goes through the rest of the space, which I don't think we need to do, but I think the one of the points that we would make is that this was part of the change management process of explaining to people what the process was going to be like as they got back into this space. I think that actually that's it for the formal presentation. And if we want to, I want to thank Scott and Rich and Christine and Janet for sharing this story, because I think it's we tried to cram it all into an hour, and I'm not sure that we succeeded. But it has been an amazing story, and I'm sure that many of you are going through similar kinds of efforts to try to figure out the future of work in your organization. But hopefully it's things like FMForward and getting together as colleagues that will allow us to learn from each other.
Yeah, absolutely, Mark. And thank you on behalf of the chapter and to all of the panelists for your time and insight. It's definitely interesting to hear these types of stories, and especially ones that bring together, strategy, data, planning, and execution all in once. It's really, really good to see. Sorry we didn't get to a lot of questions, but we do have FM overtime for those of you that are FMs in the group. So please find the link to that. If not, comment to Ashley and she can get you that link. You can talk for the next few minutes with that group.
Yeah.
And then also stay tuned.
I'll set it, yeah.
Also stay tuned later in the afternoon, because we have one more event, one more session, and that is that, well, we have a diversion later this afternoon, and then after that, quickly after, we will have our keynote closing session with Jonathan Michael Bowman with a very motivational talk called The Fine Art of People Power. So we definitely want you to join us for that, and we are almost to the finish line. Thank you all, and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Rich is, oh, everyone left. Okay, hopefully they have the link.